We're going to look at two of the many pioneering women of aviation. If I asked you to name a female aviator back in the early 1900s, you're probably going to name Amelia Earhart. But there were others before her, paving the way for women like her, but also dying for it, like she did. To be that courageous in a time when flying, no matter your gender, was a dangerous feat. I can't help but admire anyone who does things just to see if they could, even ultimately at the risk of their lives. The two women we're going to look at today didn't need flying to be successful. They were already titled and had money, but they also had that restless spirit of those who want adventure and risk and to try to do something no one else had been able to do. We're going to talk about Princess Anne Lowenstein-Wertheim and the Honorable Elsie McKay. There are some similarities to the two women. Both resorted to at least some secrecy for their respective flights. Both had their pilot licenses for several years. Both were English. Both had titles: Princess by marriage, Lady by birth for Anne, Honorable by birth for Elsie. Both attempted to fly over the Atlantic from east to west, from England to North America, thought to be the worst direction to fly in, particularly in the summer, because of the wall of wind that moves east across the ocean. Because of the wind's velocity hitting you right at you, it also makes you eat up even more gasoline. Princess Anne Lowenstein-Wertheim was born Lady Anne Saville in 1864 in England. She was planning a trip from London to New York with Captain Leslie Hamilton, along with Colonel F.F. Minchin in Captain Hamilton's Fokker Jupiter monoplane, which in other places was said to be the princess's own plane, named Saint Raphael. Though the princess had her pilot's license, her intention was to be a passenger on this flight, although others say that she planned to do her own share of piloting on the flight. The princess was in her 60s, which seemed to be just one of the many intriguing factors of this flight back in this day. Apparently, she wasn't supposed to even be on this flight, but she displaced Captain Robert McIntosh instead, who flew with British Airways. Apparently, few were aware of when exactly the flight was supposed to take place, and even fewer were aware that the princess would be on that flight. August 31st, 1927. The plane was seen crossing over Ireland in the first attempt to cross the Atlantic from England. Originally, they were heading for New York, but a last-minute change in plans had them instead heading for Ottawa, Canada. From the start, things seemed to be a little awry. The weighted-down plane went across the airfield for almost 3/4 of a mile before finally rising, nearly hitting a clump of trees. But finally it rose and disappeared into the clouds. Why so weighted down? Gasoline to make this flight, plus a wicker armchair and army cot for the princess to use during the long flight. The plane was blessed by a Roman Catholic archbishop while he held a service under the plane's wings. The princess said, quote, "I am looking forward to this trip. I am confident of my pilot and my machine. I am proud to be the first woman passenger to attempt crossing the Atlantic Ocean. I am excited, of course, but I am not nervous. Could I be anything else? It is a great adventure." End quote. Captain Hamilton appeared the most nervous of the trio. Quote, "This is the part I don't like. This is the grim part of the ordeal." End quote. He evidently referred to the dangerous moments on the ground when the plane had to gain momentum to get up into the air. Colonel Minchin said, quote, "All weather reports are in our favor. The wind will be behind us for at least half the way across. I know we'll pull through, else we wouldn't have started. We have more than 750 gallons of petrol, which should last up to 40 hours. We have sandwiches and coffee aboard and other emergency rations." End quote. The Archbishop sprinkled holy water over the machine. Quote, "God bless you. May you have a safe journey. We shall not forget to pray for you." End quote. "Goodbye," Minchin cried as the plane got underway. "We'll send a wire from Canada." End quote. Captain Hamilton was a war flyer who had been operating an air taxi service for the last 5 years. He has about 6,000 hours in the air and no serious accidents. Colonel Minchin has been a pilot for the last 4 years with British Airways, making channel crossings, and also was a war pilot. He too has about 6,000 air hours. September 1st, 1927. Supposedly, if they make it to Ottawa, they will get $25,000, 2,920 miles away. It was later said that they would not have been eligible because that money was for someone going from Ottawa to London, not the other way around. Some weather may mess them up, A stormy area off of Ireland, extending for several hundred miles, was something that they would have to traverse. But if they did, the next test would then be in the mid-Atlantic, going through cloudy weather and some showers. Off of Newfoundland, heavy fog. Now, we're many hours overdue. The plane had gas for about 44 hours of flying, and we're nearing the point where the gas would be used up. Radio stations along the coastline have been checked with, and none have reported any information. September 2nd. Lighthouses were looking into the skies. Flares from airports to guide the planes were shot into the air. The airfield at Ottawa was still crowded with people waiting to see the flight, including Mrs. Hamilton, wife of Captain Hamilton. The Canadian government was preparing to send out airplanes to look for it. The plane carried a rubber boat in case it did have to land on the ocean, but even that wouldn't guarantee any kind of safety out in the sea if it was too rough, if the plane sank too fast. The plane does not have a radio. Nothing was ever found of the airplane. It is still unknown what happened to them and why and where they landed. This was just one of many flights in this time period that would be brought down by unknown reasons in unknown locations, while people were bravely trying these new feats in aviation. Elsie McKay led quite an interesting life in her 35 years on Earth. She was an actress, a jockey, an interior decorator, and an aviator. Born in Simla, West Bengal, India, to a British colonial administrator who did a lot of interesting things in his own right. In 1917, she eloped with an actor, Dennis Wyndham, and got cut off by her parents. She herself became an actress after the parental cutoff, known as Poppy Wyndham, but this marriage would eventually be annulled in 1922. Under her stage name, Poppy Wyndham, she was reportedly the first female jockey in England and competed as often as she could. Annoyingly, I couldn't find any information about this in the newspapers in America. Where in May 1922, her marriage was annulled, and now she's been spotted in the company of her dad, Lord Inchcape, who is a shipping magnate, and he's got the dough. She and Wyndham had been married in Scotland, and allegedly the annulment was because neither the man or wife had abided by Scottish law about residency. I'm assuming because neither of them actually lived in Scotland at all, or didn't live there for a certain period of time. The father-daughter pair are heading to New York on the White Star liner, the Majestic, on her first crossing. September 6, 1922. Elsie has received her certificate as an air pilot and has her own plane, the DH-6. She was a student of Sir Alan Cobham and passed her test, one of which was a solo ascent to 5,000 feet. She ended up buying the plane that she passed the test in. After that, she could be seen flying to Paris and Scotland, among other locations. She assisted her father with his shipping and even had her own office where she could deal with matters as needed and could hurry to the dock when a ship would come into port. October 1922. Interesting story. Elsie was approached by a man who appeared to be of a higher standard of life, who told her to go on a boat on the Thames River so that no one else would hear their conversation, as he had some information that he thought she would be interested in. She went on the boat, and on the river suddenly lurched to the side, the boat with her, tipping her blackmailer into the river. Elsie took up the oars, rowed like mad to the nearest police station, but when she returned with the cops, the blackmailer could not be found. Lesson number 1, don't go out on the Thames with a strange man, but lesson number 2, if you do, make sure he winds up in the drink and save yourself. June 1925, she's working as an interior designer on steamships. She's also made several flights already. May 1926, she's been elected to the advisory committee of the British Air League. March 8, 1928. Elsie intended to fly off at noon on this date with Captain Walter G.R. Hinchcliffe from England to fly west across the Atlantic Ocean to North America. If all went well, they would be flying out from Cranwell Aerodrome in Lincolnshire, flying an American Stinson monoplane that had been brought to England from New York by ship in January. There was some secrecy about this at the time, some assumptions and conjecture. Preparations had been made, putting in extra gas tanks into the wings, plus more in special aluminum containers. The course is allegedly from Cranwell Aerodrome across Ireland and over the Atlantic to Newfoundland. They will not venture forth unless they have a good weather report across the ocean for the next 24 hours. At this point, Elsie has had her pilot's license for 5 years. The fully loaded plane will travel at a cruising speed of 90 miles an hour. Well, now, in another paper, Elsie herself is denying reports that she's going on a plane at all, either today or later. A little bit about Hinchcliffe. He is considered one of England's most prominent pilots, serving in World War I, and during that war lost one of his eyes. After the war ended, he flew commercial airlines and is currently with Imperial Airways Limited. March 14, 1928. Hinchcliffe's airplane is missing. It didn't leave Cranwell until March 13th, and it was still assumed that Elsie may be with him. An unnamed relative of hers said that Elsie had left her home and has yet to return, and assumed that she is indeed in that plane. Supposedly, Elsie was at a hotel with two ladies. Another newspaper said house. Hinchcliffe and a Gordon Sinclair, Army Reserve pilot, were also there, and all left together at 5:30 the following morning. The woman thought to be Elsie had been seen wearing a flying outfit and had rations with her. Her need for secrecy of her identity because she was afraid someone would try to keep her from trying, particularly her father. So as of 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time, it's 35 hours after he took off from England, and no word has been received since he left the Irish coast. Weather conditions were said to have been perfect for the flight to the west. Sighting of the plane along its supposed course had been reported, but not positively identified as being that of this plane once it left the Irish coast. Ocean liners have reported no sightings. The coasts of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and boats in the water have been asked to be on the lookout and to report any sightings. Though weather was good, the winds in the mid-Atlantic may have slowed them down. It's now been 35 and a half hours, and now are considered 6.5 hours overdue at their destination. Captain Hinchcliffe's wife is not worried. Mrs. Hinchcliffe thinks her husband's passenger is Gordon Sinclair. But that's been fairly denied, and reports are that Elsie had posed as a male passenger before getting on the plane. Elsie is the fifth woman to make the crossing of the Atlantic from either direction. The first 4 attempts failed. March 15, 1928. It is said that the secrecy behind the flight may lead to the absolute inability to provide any kind of rescue, if rescue is needed. Very little was known of the exact route that was going to be taken, so rather impossible to search a larger area of the ocean than if their route had been known, when just that area could be searched. At this point, it's been 24 hours since they should have landed. And of course, people are saying, it's landed, it's been heard, it's been seen. But none of those have been confirmed and are proving false. Mrs. Hinchcliffe, who thought that Gordon Sinclair was on the flight, now knows that it's not true, as now Mr. Sinclair is at the Hinchcliffe home waiting for news. His intentions had been to go on the flight, but he gave way to Elsie, who wanted to be the first woman to cross the Atlantic. Gordon told a reporter over the telephone, quote, "I assure you that Miss Mackay positively is aboard the Endeavour. The reason for the secrecy was because she requested I remain in the background for a time to allay the anxiety of her relatives. But now a long time has elapsed, and I can come to light again. When the airplane departed, I returned immediately to London and did not return to my wife. I remained in an obscure hotel. Hinchcliffe carried between 450 and 500 gallons of gasoline, sufficient for about 45 hours to 50 hours, but that was dependent on cross or headwinds in the air." End quote. It's now been 53 hours, and there is no hope that the plane is still in the air. Anxiety increases with every report of a signing, but none of those have come to fruition. Washington Times, quote, April 12, 1928. "The death of this beautiful and courageous young woman is inexpressibly sad. A terrible waste of courage it may seem, but it is not. What seems the reckless courage of today becomes regular, unfailing achievement tomorrow. Men and women risk their lives so that others may do safely that which they could not accomplish. The ocean became the grave of this poor girl, but such courage as hers will conquer waves, winds, and time. Flying across all the oceans and seas and around the world will be the commonplace experience of those that come after." July 3, 1928. Viscount and Lady Inchcape, Elsie's parents, have given $2.5 million, or £500,000, to reduce the national debt in England. The money was to be placed in a trust known as the Elsie McKay Fund. The donation will be left to accumulate for 50 years. December 8, 1928. The B.F. Goodrich Company believes that the undercarriage of an airplane washed up on shore of the Irish coast and is thought to be from the Endeavour airplane. A tire found by guards at Donegal, Ireland, was the same used on the Stinson Detroiters, and eventually it would be identified as being from the plane because the serial numbers matched. The number of deaths of flyers attempting these ocean crossings was a lot. In spring and summer 1927, 40 pilots attempted long-distance flights, leading to 21 deaths. Charles Lindbergh in May 1927 made the first solo nonstop flight from Long Island to Paris, which did bring about the urge of a lot of people to make similar flights. But unfortunately, there was a lack of experience, engines that couldn't handle that kind of flying, navigation technology that was not up to snuff for use in air flying. With the number of deaths, it was seen that something needed to be done. Even Lindbergh, seen as an expert flyer, had to be taught over-water navigation, but this was a good thing. By advertising that this was something a man as famous and illustrious of an aviator as he needed to be taught, others would see that being taught how to navigate was a necessity. Clients were now reaching out to be taught the latest in over-water navigation techniques, and hopefully this would save many lives, in addition to just the normal advances in airplane tech. To all of the brave men and women who died trying to do something no one else had been able to do for the advancement of science, sport, technology, what have you, we salute each and every one of you.